Shalom and welcome to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and welcoming back for the second time our guest, Lori Wildenberg, author of Messy Parenting, Powerful and Practical Ways to Strengthen Family Connections. Lori is a mom of four, licensed parent and family educator, and national speaker, passionate about helping families build connections that last a lifetime. She's the author and co-author of 5 parenting books. She's also the co-founder of 1 Corinthians 13 parenting ministry and lead mentor mom at the Moms Together Facebook community. The Wildenberg's home is nestled in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and appearing for the second time after her debut appearance for her book Messy Journey from May of 2018. Today is the second day that Messy Parenting has been out, and we welcome back Lori Wildenberg to the program.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for having me on again. I appreciate it.
Well, you are so welcome. So tell us, you are a grandma for the first time. You've had your first grandbaby. And tell me about all the changes and all the joys and what it feels like to be a grandparent.
Oh my gosh. It's pretty out-of-the-box awesome. So our little Matthew Robert is about 2.5 months old now. And he is my son's son. And how cool to have the great privilege and honor to watch your child be a parent. It is just, there's just nothing like that. It just makes my heart soar. And I'm thankful they don't live too far from us, so we are able to get together fairly regularly. And gosh, if I don't see little Maddie for a week, the next week he looks so much bigger. It's just crazy. So yeah, I would say that's a pretty good gig.
Pretty good gig. So for those that don't remember our interview from May of last year, take us a little bit back to the early years of your life growing up. What really impacted you to kind of take on the role of becoming a parenting expert, parenting mentor, and grabbing a hold of practical ways for parents to be able to engage in a more connected way than the very disconnected world we live in?
Oh gosh, yeah, great questions. So my journey is one of, I started out being an elementary school teacher for 10 years and loved teaching, loved kids. And then we ended up having 4 of our own kids. Our oldest we adopted from Colombia. And then we had 3 the old-fashioned way. So I love being a parent, and we moved to San Diego, and I did not end up getting a teaching license in San Diego. I was a really busy mom with 4 little kids, and so then I started taking some parenting classes because of my oldest having some hidden disabilities and challenges. I needed to be a little better equipped. So then I took these parenting classes, and I thought, oh my gosh, I love this. I would love to do this someday, but I would love to combine it with my faith. And so then we moved back to Minnesota, all 6 of us, and I started taking classes so that I could get also licensed in parent and family education. And once I got that, I started teaching parent and family education, and then that's where the first book was birthed from, was one of the classes, one of the curriculums I developed, and that was called Empowered Parents Putting Faith First. So, and that book I co-authored with Becky Danielson, who at the time was one of my small group facilitators in the class that I was teaching at my church.
Now, role models in your life as far as faith and parenting are concerned, what kind of environment did you grow up in that imparted into you both faith and parenting, both the good, the bad, the pluses and minuses, what you wanted to be, what you didn't want to be? I think every one of us says that I'm never going to say that, I'm never going to be that, I'm never going to do that, and then you catch yourself saying it, doing it, and being it, and that's the real wake-up call for us when we have that self-realization. What was the model for you?
That's good. We do have our tapes that play in our heads, and we can choose to keep them or choose to switch them up. So great role modeling from my parents. You know, we were a church-going family. I wouldn't say that I fully embraced a personal faith until I actually went to a Christian camp as a tween. And then I really had a better understanding of having what a personal faith was, not just getting dressed up in my Sunday clothes and going to church. So my parents set the stage, and then the Lord just kept, you know, putting that fertilizer on and kept watering the plants through different things like church camp. And then I was in the church choir. Thankfully, they'd take anybody because I didn't know, I couldn't sing. But and church choir was some really great ways that the Lord really moved in my life. And then later on, after Tom and I got married, and we were coming from different religious backgrounds, but we still had the same faith, we really needed to be intentional about finding a church that really was one that spoke to both of us. And so that started us on that journey. And then the Lord uses sometimes hard things to kick us to the next level. And one of the things that he used with me was infertility, and then going through that adoption process, which it's very clear you are not in control in those moments, even though we have this illusion we're in control. When you carry a baby, you know, with a pregnancy, it's still, again, it's all in God's hands. But so there were moments that really moved me forward. And when I was teaching, there was a gal who taught across the hall from me, and she really impacted me with her faith. And so we would have a lot of conversations when we would be out at recess watching the kids.
The idea of family connections and families disconnected, and all the things that we have introduced as technological gifts and technological breakthroughs and technological tools have also been the very heart of what has disconnected the family and given us a false sense of connection, which is exactly the kind of deception that allows for brokenness to creep in, and for isolation to creep in, and for self-worth questioning to creep in. How do we get to this point where we have to address the family used to be a family, a unity, sat down at the dinner table together, talked about things. Dad came home from work, and you all gathered at the table, and you talked about school, and then you went and did your homework, and there was kind of a pattern to life, and maybe that was the idyllic 50s and 60s that we look back on and say, well, you know, we didn't have to get home until the street lights came on, and you didn't have cell phones, you didn't have all these things, and you actually talked, and you discussed the issues of the day, and the newspaper had credibility, and all that's changed. The whole construct of family and connections have changed to where families will sit at a table, and all of them will have their iPhones out, and all of them will be texting. Some of them will be texting each other, and they're at the same table. So this idea of first admitting and recognizing, I always say the first step is recognizing that you have a problem, is a disconnected family. What does that look like so that we can then begin to connect that family?
Oh my gosh. I think the disconnected family is almost more typical now than the connected family. And even though we might be sharing the same space, we're not interacting. So yeah, technology, it can be really great, but we can also misuse it. And there is actually research is showing that it can become very addictive. And so we really have to put up some boundaries with that. It's really important. When I speak to various mom groups or parent groups, everyone wants to be connected to their family. They just aren't sure how. And because we have this Western mindset of raising our kids to be independent, we raise them in that way, and then we're surprised when they've actually separated from us when they become young adults. But we've actually sabotaged the relationship that we hold the most dear. And I think we need an awareness that what we probably mean to do is to raise our children to be responsible. And this idea of independence is really great when it comes to, it's really great when it comes to, let's say, being a member of a community and a country. But when it comes to your family, you don't want to live with a bunch of roommates. So that's something that we really have to be very careful of, not to raise them to be independent where they feel they have to solve problems on their own, or they don't even let someone, a family member in on a celebration because it doesn't cross their mind because they are independent. So what we want to do is to go ahead and instead shoot for interdependence, where we can celebrate together and go through challenges together, not in a codependent kind of a way, but in a way where we're supporting and encouraging each other, which is biblical. You think of the Trinity, that's an interdependent relationship, and that's what we're shooting for. We want responsible kids who value relationship as opposed to raising independent children.
That's a complicated, intentional, required, and kind of says either it has to be mandatory participation, even though if you have more than 3, there's going to be one who's going to want to rebel and not want to be a part of it. Why do we have to do this? Why are you punishing us? Why are you making us do this? How do you create the culture in a family where people want to embrace that? What's the value proposition to the family itself? If you try to explain to a 13-year-old that when you're 35, this is going to be really important to you, they're going to say, well, then tell me when I'm 35, spare me the lesson today, call me in 22 years, and give me the lesson then. There's just not this foundational interaction that there used to be in parenting. There's more parents are facilitators of an agenda which has been given to us at the beginning of the year by the school, and involves curriculum, extracurricular activities, and a series of driving around. And I've never seen so many 16-year-olds with their own cars in my life, and it's because the parents are just so worn out of 15 years of driving to everything and rearranging their entire schedule and life around this transportation network, which is called a family. So how do you position, how do you posture, how do you frame this so that people are on board, that you don't have that one sulker in the corner, the one rebel, the one who you're ruining my life? You know exactly who I'm talking about.
A lot of times we do have kiddos who rebel, and often in faith-filled families you're going to have those little rascals, but it's because God's working out their their story with them, and they need to wrestle with their faith and own it themselves, and that's okay. Um, so I think simple tweaks are the way to go. Simple, minor adjustments that have major, great payoffs. So, for instance, it's an attitude, it's a way of approaching things. You look at what you have to do and what you want to do, and you make your choices within that framework. But also just minor things like, for instance, if someone were to spill in my household, I'm telling you, it was with 4 little kids, all 2 years apart, like ages 5 and under. You can just imagine there was major spilling in our house all the time. It wasn't a meal till somebody spilled, and it started to drive me completely crazy. So this wasn't a noble way of coming about this idea. It was really self-preservation, and maybe the children's preservation too. But I began saying, that's okay, everybody spills, I'll help you clean it up. Sort of a Three Musketeers attitude. We're in this together. We're going to do this together, all for one and one for all. And so rather than saying, that's okay, everybody spills, go grab a rag and clean it up, I would say, that's okay, everybody spills, I will help you clean it up. Because what I wanted them to see is with that's okay, they knew I wasn't going to go crazy over the spills in life. Everybody spills, it took the shame away from making a mistake. And I was more approachable then. And then I will help you clean it up. I'm going to come alongside you in the good times and the bad, and you're not on your own. But yes, you need to be responsible and participate in this process. So I started saying that, and it ended up kind of becoming our family philosophy. So that is how, in the midst of daily life, no matter how busy you are, you can still communicate a family philosophy of our family is important, and we walk alongside each other, and we're there for each other. Not in a codependent way, an interdependent way. And then the beautiful thing is you're still within earshot, but you're not in the room, and somebody spills, and one of the siblings says, that's okay, everybody spills, I'll help you clean it up. And that would become music to my ears.
The strategies that you talk about in the book are the same way as the strategies you talked about in Messy Journey, are strategies that were actually a culmination of things that you did, you actually applied. They weren't theoretical, they were actually implemented and effective. Is that the same way with messy parenting?
Yes, I think you maintain grace, and you always speak truth. And truth can be spoken kindly. So you walk in that same tension of being able to be truthful and kind and demonstrate grace. And when you have all of those things combined, not one without the other, when you have them all commingled together, you end up being in a situation where your kids trust you. They know that your word is true. They know that you have compassion and empathy for them. And even if they wander off the path, they still know that you are there. Sometimes pursuing, sometimes waiting, depending on where the Lord would have you. Sometimes the shepherd goes and follows that lost sheep and pursues, and in the story of the prodigal son, the father waited. So wherever the Lord would have you, but to have that same countenance of grace and truth, to build in that compassion and that empathy. And kindness draws us all together. So, yeah, the philosophy is the same.
Are there preconceived notions or lies or kind of untruths that we've bought into as parents that we need to shatter?
Yes, I would say One of those, not just the independent lie, but also that God doesn't give you any more than you can handle. Well, God always gives you more than you can handle, or allows that to happen in your life, because otherwise we wouldn't need him. So yes, God, we do get more than we can handle. And that is something that, you know, we need to really remember, that the Lord is there and we aren't meant to carry these burdens alone.
You know, throughout Scripture we talk about fathers don't exasperate your children. We talk about the passage of Scripture is to esteem the other more than yourself, to let no unwholesome talk come from your mouth, but only that which is for the encouragement of others. But there is sibling rivalry. We read about sibling rivalry in the story of Joseph. We read about sibling rivalry in Esau and Jacob. We read about sibling rivalry in Isaac and Ishmael. We read about sibling rivalry throughout the Bible. There are Cain and Abel. I mean, there's just riddled with sibling rivalry. How do we navigate that when biblically it shows that in some of these cases it's catastrophic? It's world dividing and will bring about actually an end time battle because of this great divide.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it is human nature. And when we set up our kids for competition in the family rather than cooperation, I think that's one thing that we do that actually facilitates a situation like a Cain and Abel. Even though Jonathan and David weren't actually blood brothers, they would have considered themselves brothers. And they are probably our best example of how to have a relationship where it's one of caring and cooperation and support, and setting ourselves aside. Now that's not easy, and that's only done with the Lord's help. But as parents, we can totally set the stage for appreciating the gifting that each child has, and rather than setting them up for a competitive situation. Competition is meant to be outside the home, not within the home.
Well, it makes a great deal of sense. We're talking with Lori Wildenberg, author of the newly released book just yesterday, Messy Parenting, Powerful and Practical Ways to Strengthen Family Connections. When we come back, we're going to talk about affirmation. We're going to talk about being drawn together with people smarts, your list, 5 rights our kids should embrace. We're going to talk about some features of messy parenting and things that are practical and applicable to restoring unity and strength within the family bond. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Shalom. I'm the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, Executive Director of Igniting a Nation and host of the daily TV program Revealing the Truth, seen live every Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. Central Standard Time at www.ianbn.com, and then replayed throughout the day and night via our website. All of our segments can be seen on the Igniting a Nation YouTube channel. Since our launch in January of this year, we've expanded our global reach to over 54 countries with a social media following of over 125,000. Our commitment is to bring you the most in-depth interviews with authors, subject matter experts, and thought leaders from around the world. We have interviewed guests from Israel, Brazil, England, India, and all across North America. All of our authors are featured on the Books and Media page on our website, www.ianbn.com. There you can find a direct link to the book you want to order, and we receive a small commission directly from Amazon. There is no cost to you for this service. In addition to our daily teachings and interviews, we make available to you the archive of all of the interviews on our YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram channels. Our live program is available from our homepage, and there is never a charge to you for any of this access. We made the decision long ago that we would remain a commercial-free resource that would not be influenced by any pressure from any outside company. There are only two ways that we are able to continue to operate this ministry and provide you with the only live 4-hour daily Christian television talk show program. The first is through your support and tax-deductible contributions to Igniting a Nation. These can be made directly through the donate button on the website or sent through the mail to Igniting a Nation, 2700 Corporate Drive, Suite 120, Birmingham, Alabama, 35242. The other way we support the program is by offering you a unique opportunity to have access to over 10 years worth of teachings on a subscription basis. The teaching archives contains all of my prior sermons, Torah studies, prophecy in the news videos, and much more for the low subscription price of $5 per month. This subscription grants you unlimited access to over 800 hours of content not available elsewhere and is updated weekly with the most current prophecy classes. In addition to 20 hours of original TV programming each weekday, we invite you to join us live every Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday evenings for our Prophecy in the News classes. The times and locations are listed on our events page on the website www.ianbn.com. Every day, you and I are faced with the challenge of where we will go to hear the truth. We are committed to bring you the only program of its kind that covers the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. We cannot do this without your support. Since we launched on January 5th, 2017, we have aired over 300 individual teachings, interviews, and commentaries not available anywhere else. We are now working side by side with almost every major Christian publishing house to bring you the most in-depth feature interviews possible. Our 1-hour features address every subject that affects the believer's life. We are hearing of salvations from the Middle East, Africa, and all across the United States. Lives are being changed every day, and we have only just begun. Our mission is to become your trusted resource and grant you access to the people, tools, and information you need to grow in your relationship with the Lord. You can help us by liking us on social media and through your financial support. We know you have many choices in who you support, but we are prayerfully asking you to consider helping us keep revealing the truth, true to our calling, to cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth like no other program available. Donate today and help us bring the message to the four corners of the earth. Visit www.ianbn.com and donate, buy a book, or subscribe to our teaching archives. Without you, we do not exist. Shalom and welcome back to this edition of Revealing the Truth, where we cover the headlines, the heartlines, and biblical truth. I'm your host, the Reverend Rabbi Eric Walker, and joining us again is Lori Wildenberg, author of the newly released book, Messy Parenting, Powerful and Practical Ways to Strengthen Family Connections. Lori, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Eric.
Glad to have you. Messy Parenting. Boy, what a great title. What made you continue? I know you did Messy Journey. What made you continue down the path of messiness?
I think just because life is always unexpected. Most of us look back on our lives and we would say we had never expected our life or this situation to come into our lives this way. And I've realized that most of us parent to what we think is the dream or the expected, rather than parent knowing that the unexpected, the unhappiness, the hardship is going to be part of our life as well. You've heard the saying where most people would agree with this. Why wouldn't you? I just want my kids to be happy. You know, everybody wants happiness, but yet that's only a fourth of a life. We also have other experiences where we have mad and sad and scared, and all that's part of life too. And if you never felt afraid, how would you ever learn courage? How would you ever learn how to be brave in the midst of a certain circumstance? And so sad, if we never experience things that cause us to grieve, where does the compassion and the empathy come from? So we need to be able to have a life well lived and fully lived, and not just parent to the happy expected, but also to those other things as well. And that's when life gets messy, when things aren't happy.
In your book, how do you address this over affirmation, this excessive praise, this over elevating, almost to the point where you create an environment where if it's not positive, it's devastating. Not that if it's not positive, it's negative or corrective, it's devastating. All of a sudden, it's an argument where it was simply a word of correction.
Yeah. Kids today, and it's been going on for probably a couple of decades now, aren't as resilient as previously, because they are unable to receive correction. I was speaking to a mom's group, a MOPS group, and I was talking about this very thing, this correction. And one mom raised her hand and she said that her daughter said that when she corrects her, she hurts her heart. And I said, well, why don't you respond with, well, I'm not talking to your heart, I'm talking to your head. And so we need to be able to work things out of our head and teach our children to do the same thing, not to be easily offended, but to be in a situation where they're able to receive correction and to learn. Now, correction shouldn't be criticism or sarcasm. Correction in a way that honors the Lord and is respectful of the person. But yes, this generation has been called the fragile generation. And we tend to swoop in and rescue a lot due to that happiness factor, wanting our kids to be happy, and we want to solve their problems and not let them experience any discomfort. Yet what we all know is counter to that. We learn the best when we've made mistakes. And how much better to make a mistake when you're in the safety of your family home, and then you can learn something, rather than when you're an adult and you make a mistake out in the world. It isn't as kind. And so we need to let our kids take some reasonable risks, not risky risks, but reasonable risks, and step out of the way and let them fail. And when they're grieving, don't try to make it better. When their pet dies, don't try to make it better right away. Let them be sad, because that is a real experience for them. So we need to be able to show them how to live real life within the home.
You talk in the book about over-affirming or excessive and insincere praise being poisonous, but then you also talk about affirming our kids. So it's kind of, where do you strike the balance? How do you affirm without tipping the scale to excessive? What are ways you do that, and how can you separate affirmation from praise? Because the one is normally performance-based, the other one is the person-based. One has to deal with the action, the other has to deal with the person.
Yeah, really good question. So when I think of giving affirmations, again, you speak to those character qualities that you say the person, right? Wow, when you noticed that $5 bill had fallen out of that woman's purse, you picked it up and you handed that to her. That was really great. That shows that you are such a trustworthy person, someone that somebody else can rely on, and that you are an honest person. So those are more affirmations. praise would be along the lines of what the end result is. And not that you can't praise the end result. I think that that isn't bad. It's just when it's too focused on, rather than to the expense of not focusing on the character qualities. I think that's where we run into trouble with praise. Another place that we can run into trouble with praise is when it is actually not true. And our kids can smell a phony a mile away. But so we want to give affirmations and praise that is true and sincere. That sort of thing does encourage a person to try harder, to move forward through a difficult situation, because they have had some success with the outcome of something. That is a good thing. They feel a little more confident in that. But never to praise in an insincere manner without adding in the character qualities. Those would be that would be my warning, is to avoid the praise that doesn't have the character qualities attached to it, or if it is insincere.
How do you address boundaries? The boundary between parent and child, keeping the lines from being blurred as to who the parent and who the child is, and that I'm not your friend. It seems that the trend is be friends with your kids. Then the kids begin to dominate. Then the kids begin to tantrum. The kids begin to demand. And then you yield to the demand, and they learn the behavior that, okay, well, the louder I am and the more public I am, the faster I'm going to get what I want. And so they become manipulative as opposed to corrective or responsive. And then the parent is constantly trying to appease the child. And then there becomes this idea that I want to be friends with my child. I want a relationship with my child, but that relationship is not parent-child. That relationship is friend. And I want my daughter or my son to think of me as their friend. And I don't want my daughter thinking of me as her friend. I am not her friend. I am her father. And I have the latitude as her father that even at 29 years old to say to her, I love you, baby, but I don't like what you're doing. And if you can't see the future of the path of the sign that says dead end, and you don't see it, my age, I can tell you the path has a dead end, and if you keep going down this path, you're going to run into a wall. Now, you can listen to me and learn on your own, or learn on your own. That's entirely your choice, but I'm not afraid to tell you that because I'm worried about our friendship being put in jeopardy.
Oh, yeah, you're right. A lot of parents are very concerned about the relationship and end up focusing too much on that without being able to set up, as you say, boundaries or rules or guidelines for the family. When we have relationship and rules mixed together, which is really what you could even call grace and truth mixed together, then you end up with a respectful relationship, respect in the home, respect going both ways. Our kids need to know, and they want to know, and they crave to know that their parents are safe and that their parents are the place where that belonging takes place and that security is there. If we continually focus on the relationship, our children feel less safe because they feel as though you wouldn't be able to say no to something where they could inevitably get hurt. And the thing that when people tend to parent toward just a friendship, they actually end up having an end result where the child actually resents them and they ruin the relationship because they have been unable to say no. So you might hear from your child, well, I thought, or why didn't you say no? Or if you knew that wasn't going to go well, how come you didn't tell me? Those might be some words that might come out. Or if they dare you to punish them, if they might say, yeah, you say that you're going to punish me, but you won't. if that dare comes out, what you know is then perhaps you have neglected the rules or the boundaries or the guideline part of the relationship, which is what a parent is called to instill. Just as the Lord sets out, the best way for us to live is to follow his, the 10 Commandments. He lays that out. That's for our best. That's our best interest to follow things that way. So we need to set a similar stage. You don't sacrifice relationship for rules or rules for relationship.
Lori, everything you're saying, I absolutely agree with. There's not a single premise within the book, not a single concept that you presented that I have anything but complete and total support for. But, and it's a big but, parenting requires two parents, a mom and a dad. And mom may be on board with every bit of this, and dad doesn't even get it. Dad doesn't know the difference between affirmation and praise. He doesn't know the difference between encouraging participation trophies because he wanted the kid to feel like at least you tried. And he sees that from a man's perspective, and he's trying to build up somebody that's at least willing to get in the race. Even if you know you're going to be last, get in the race. At least you tried and you gave it your best. And so then it becomes a conflicted parenting model, and this can't work unless there's unity and a shared vision with the concept. So as the precursor to this, how do I get, odd for me to say, but how do I get my husband, how do I get my spouse to participate in this and to buy into the vision? What must I do in preparation as a couple to create an environment? Because it's great if there's no children and we decide on, we're pregnant, let's take a look at some parenting ideas of how we're going to parent. That's great. But you already have children and you want to change the dynamic of that household. How can I implement this, and how do I get hubby on board or wife on board with this concept that we can break free from these parenting myths and from our own individual experiences of how we were raised. And my dad said that to me, and that didn't, I turned out okay. I'm not a bad father because my dad said that to me. Why are you telling me I shouldn't say that to my kid? And so can it be a source of conflict? And so if it can be a source of conflict in parenting style, how do we get husband and wife, mom and dad on the same page so that they can then implement this messy parenting lifestyle?
Yeah, that is a pretty common thing where you might have the same hope for the same end result, but the way in getting there might be slightly different. I think slightly different is okay. I think that it actually makes for one really great parent to have parents maybe be similar but not exactly the same, to have that unity. And to get there, sometimes that's a little tough. When parents come to me and they are on not the same page, and they want to be, but neither one is feeling heard by the other. So what I suggest they do is to come up with a family mission statement and to kind of go back to the beginning, to think, what is it that we want in our family, and talk about, make that family mission statement. And I have a tool actually that makes it sort of easy to do. It's not rocket science. It's quick. You read some of these books and it's like overwhelmingly, you have to have so much time, and it's too overwhelming to do. But to come up with a family mission statement, and once you're able to do that, then you can kind of break down, well, how do we get there? And that is the place to start. And typically the moms are the ones that read the books and then say, honey, you got to read this book. They're not, the dads are less likely to read the book. But what they are likely to do is to, at the end of each chapter, they are probably likely to do a discussion. And there's questions at the end of each chapter, or there's even a study guide. Well, actually, there's a study guide at the end of the book. They're not at the end of each chapter. There's a study guide at the end of the book to go through. And I do believe that that's where you can start to have some conversation. But that's the key. It needs to be conversation. Sometimes as women, we get really excited about things, especially when it has to do with our kids or relationships, even marriage. And we find these great resources, and then we try to impart the knowledge that we have learned, and that rubs our spouse the wrong way. They feel like, you're always telling me what to do. It's better to discover it together. And so, you know, if you can sit down and go through, you know, a chapter at a time and do the discussions in the back, that really helps you get closer. You'll never be exactly the same, but God will use that too. And when we can bathe this whole thing in prayer so that we're not feeling offended when someone suggests something, that we're actually listening to and evaluating and thinking, well, maybe there's something to this. If we can set our sensitivities aside for the sake of our marriage, for the sake of our children, and to glorify God, I think then we're able to work through some of these things.
At what age do these concepts apply? Is it, one, ever too late to begin the process? And two, with the new model of grandparents becoming much more involved in child rearing, is this a great resource for grandparents or grandparents soon to become, or grandparents already very involved in their grandchildren's lives? Is this a resource to help them kind of get on board with a new way of thinking about child rearing so that they are in partnership with their children whose children they are helping to rear as well?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have quite a few grandparents that actually attend my parenting classes. And it's such a great thing, you know, especially if the parents and grandparents can come together. That's really awesome. And it is never too late. It's never too late because God can make up time in the air. He is not bound by our mistakes. He's not bound by time. We have a great big God, and so we can start anew today. Always. He can transform and renew and restore anything. So no matter where we are, it is never too late. And of course, you know, it's great to start when you're expecting your baby and to kind of make a plan. Wow, that's pretty great. But you don't throw up your hands and give up when that child is 10 or 20 or maybe even 30, because relationship is still valuable to us, because we want a relationship with our kids that lasts a lifetime and prayerfully stretches into eternity.
In your book, you have in the chapter Drawn Together with People Smart, you list 5 rights our kids should embrace. We've got about 2 minutes left. What are those 5 rights that kids should embrace?
Okay. They have the right to be treated with respect, to respectfully express feelings, opinions, and expectations. So respectfully is the key. To agreeably disagree. So we can disagree, but it needs to be done in an agreeable fashion. And to talk about whether expectations and demands from another person are reasonable. And then to have the opportunity to wait and ponder and think about and maybe pray about an answer before giving one.
I think that's first time I've heard it framed that way, but that sounds extremely reasonable, that the children should have like a Bill of Rights, something that we create an environment where they feel protected, respected, and safe, that there is a format and a forum for them to be able to voice an opinion without it being presented as an argument. And I think that's where the tension builds and the boundaries get pushed, is when there's a disrespectful dialogue and the child doesn't feel that they're being heard. Although they don't have equal rights, there's still the parent who's the benevolent dictator, still has the final authority. But hearing the opinion and understanding how your child thinks and responds helps you connect closer to them. Yes. So that you're able to frame things in, they have a love language too. We tend to look at the love languages for adults, but there's love languages for children. There's different ways in which kids learn. There's different ways in which they process. And it's incumbent upon us as parents to be smarter than our children. And a lot of times we wind up not smarter than our children because we defer and we don't want to push their buttons. Listen, your children will forget where they put their shoes, but they will never forget where your buttons are. And so they know how to push them, and that's part of the process. But once again, you have captivated us with another messy book, taking us from messy journey to messy parenting, powerful and practical ways to strengthen family connections. Lori Wildenberg, thank you so much for always being a great guest here on Revealing the Truth and exposing us to new ideas, new ways of thinking, new approaches, which are practical. They don't really challenge you to the point of stretching you beyond what you're capable of, but it kind of puts up a protective wall that allows you to safely parent and to feel comfortable and confident in your parenting so that you can raise comfortable and confident children. So thank you again for sharing this with us here on Revealing the Truth.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. God bless. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll bring you the next edition of Revealing the Truth.